Hi, my name is Maggie, and I'm a Senior Business Development Manager for International Markets at Userlane. That means that I work with a variety of different customers internationally and try to help them with mastering software instantly. But today, the topic for our webinar is actually more about what happens once I pass the baton to customer success. So joining us, we have Rebecca Mass from Monday.com, and our topic for today's session is going to be about identifying friction with your customers and what exactly to do next in that customer experience. So Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us. Hey.
Hi. Hello, Maggie. Thanks for having me today. I am excited to chat with you. Hi, everyone. As Maggie said, I am Rebecca, and I am a Customer Success Manager at Monday.com. And for those of you who don't know what Monday.com is, it is a work OS that empowers teams to run projects and workflows to be able to adjust to your shifting needs with confidence. And a core part of Monday.com is the ability to create transparency, have collaboration, and remove manual grunt work from your processes. And for this, I've been a customer success manager in SaaS for many years, and I'm very passionate about bringing users a positive experience and helping them solve their problems.
We're super excited to have Rebecca with us today. So for this particular topic, in terms of basically where my job ends and where Rebecca's takes over. So during the entire process, I'm working with customers, I'm asking questions. What exactly is your pain point? What do you need to solve? And why are you talking to us in the first place? And I do my absolute best to address these problems, diagnose potential solutions. But at the end of the day, once they sign the contract, it's then Rebecca's privilege to take over and actually help them get across the finish line. But that's not always the easiest process. So how exactly is that handover from sales to customer success, Rebecca?
Yes. So it's funny you bring it up. I think everyone in the world of sales and CS experiences this, right, across the board, wherever you work. It's kind of one of those age-old tales of customer success and sales potential friction. I will say, I think the internal sync between AEs and CSMs are extremely crucial before we even kick things off with the customer. However, I think what's even more important is when you are on that initial kickoff call with your customer. As the customer success manager, it's your responsibility to now own the process, right? So regardless of things you might have not gotten from sales or what sales maybe said, I think it's important to take that, 30 minutes or an hour, however you manage your initial kickoffs, to really set the stage and to set expectations and to kind of dive into some of those potential friction points. So what I mean by that is it might be uncomfortable to want to ask someone a negative question, but I find it so important to take a few minutes to really ask your customers what their pain points are. So especially if they're new, maybe they're coming from another product, or maybe they are a current customer and they've upgraded, if that's something that happens at your company, and now they're getting dedicated CS. Whatever the reason is, it's so important to spend time on those pain points because you're going to learn so much. So I think people try to shy away from that, but it's actually really critical to hear that from the customer because you're going to get a lot of information. You're going to get potential red flags. You're going to get also just some really great information and data points for you to actually set them up for success.
Yeah, and from the sales perspective, I mean, of course, my entire job is not necessarily to convince, but at least to try and show them how Userlane, in my case, could be the right fit. But once I pass that over to you guys, then all of a sudden you're getting this predetermined case, and you need to really dig a lot deeper to find out how you can really address these issues specifically with the solution you offer, right? So I'm curious, what exactly are the biggest friction points you tend to get during that kickoff process? So what can sales do to improve, more or less?
Yeah, so I will say I feel very fortunate that when I'm getting new customers, I feel that I usually have a pretty good picture, and our sales team spends a lot of time with our customers, kind of working through or building out some workflows even. So that's a positive. But of course, there's different styles and everyone has a different way of doing things. So I will say what I find is super important, again, is asking those questions to customers and digging even when a customer might not want to give you information. For example, if they're unclear of what a pain point was in the past, being able to give them examples like, was a pain point that you had to wait 5 days to get something approved, or did you not have visibility into who owned specific tasks, just thinking through in the Monday world. So I think it's really being able to dig. And then when you do find, if you find, I'd say, any concerns as you are kicking things off. For example, if you feel there's misset expectations, I definitely think it's important to work with the AE or whoever that person might be on that sales side. But I think it's also an opportunity to understand more about what that customer actually really wants. And I find that customers might think they want to do something a certain way, right? And and you realize that maybe we can't do it X way that they're thinking of, but we can still accomplish that end goal, right? So it's really important, I think, to dig on that because that's a friction point, right?
That's a huge point. Yeah.
Customers tell you something, so it's not even always a question of, oh, they were missold. Forget about that being a topic. It's more that they come in, they're super excited, and they're going to tell you, no, we want to do it these ways. We need X to happen and Y to happen. And
that's a conversation that I have all the time with our customers. Sorry to interrupt, but
no,
one of my colleagues, I go and I write her and I say, hey, Maria, one of my customers really wants this. Let's make it happen. And she stops and she says, have you asked them why they want that?
Yes. And it's so important. And you know what? I get into that myself as well because we're people pleasers, right? I think we always want to make people happy. We want people to be excited. And I think it's so important when we hear those things like, we need this to do that, even if we know we can do it in the way they're talking about it, to still understand like, okay, well, what's the end goal? What's the why? Because I personally found that to just be a friction point in general, where customers think they want something and it's our responsibility to, of course, help them get there, but to really, I don't know if challenge is the right word, but to really, to be curious and to really care to make sure we're getting all the information we need, because exactly what you said, if you go to someone in CS or you go to someone on the product side and you say, the customer wants this, the why is like so important, if someone pushing back on you. So I think that that's even just a natural friction between customers and, anyone working with them, just to really understand like, what do they need versus them thinking, oh, I needed to do this type of thing.
I think that's a really good point that you hit on too, because that I think was my biggest issue getting into sales. I've been doing it for almost 2 years now. And like you said, people pleaser, the customer wants this. So I want to give them that because that makes everybody happy. Then the customer gets their problem solved. The company makes money. I make money. Everyone's thrilled. But that really is a friction point and a skill that you kind of need to sharpen in terms of leaning into that friction. And also to be comfortable with that potential discomfort. But I genuinely find that most customers are so much happier. It's like if you think that this is the easiest way to do it, but then all of a sudden the customer success manager challenges you and says, what if I offered you a way that's 50 times simpler and like 10 times less work? Why wouldn't they take it? And I think that's really where a customer success manager needs to have a backbone. That's really cool, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. And so I'm curious, once you actually get into that process of working with this customer and measuring their success and their happiness, what are the most common KPIs or indicators that you're looking for to see if they're happy?
Yes. So I think it comes down to a few things. I'd say we at Monday.com, of course, measure health. Everyone, I think, has their own way of doing that. But I'd also say from the holistic point of view of that customer, what are they engaging with within the product? We have a customer experience team at Monday.com that is pretty much the core of making sure our customers are successful. Within customer experience, we do have what's traditionally referred to as support, right? So a ticketing system or folks who also manage our knowledge base. And so I'd say those are key factors in supporting the success of customer success managers at our organization, in the sense that I want to know, are my customers reaching out, right? Are they reaching out to have how-to questions resolved? Are they having trouble accomplishing something? So being able to look at that as well. And then, of course, how quickly are you getting them to that aha moment, whatever that means for them. So it can be a simple thing, can be a big thing, but sort of I find that customers, of course, have really big plans when they start working with you, and that's amazing. It's important, though, I think, to start with like the simplest thing we can do to get them to where they need to go eventually, and to help eliminate even some friction in their day-to-day, right? So that to me are things I look at. So let me know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and I like what you mentioned about how often they reach out. Now, some people,
Yeah.
I've worked in a variety of different positions at
Yeah.
startups, and I know when I used to work really closely with customer support, you would have some customers, depending on the product, who reach out constantly.
Yeah.
And I mean, jokingly, they can almost get a reputation as like a problem customer, right? But then
Yeah.
what you normally learn is, hey, this is somebody who is engaged enough with the product to care. They really
Yeah.
want this help. They want this expertise. So do you see somebody who constantly looks for more info as a problem customer or like a valuable source? I think it can be seen as both, right?
Yeah, I totally hear you. And I've been in other roles as well where that's that sort of frequent flyer. Is that a bad thing? Is it a good thing? But I'd say overall, from my experience, that I think it can be twofold. It depends, again, what they're reaching out about, right? So I think what's more important is what are you doing with that data? Are you categorizing it? Are you collecting NPS surveys from customers after they submit a ticket, right? And if so, then are you actually looking at it? Are you taking action? Are you collaborating with your product team or the relevant folks to eliminate any of those friction points that you might be collecting? And also, there is, I'd say, someone reaching out a lot is not necessarily a bad thing. That is why we have the resources to give our customers the help they need, and kind of helping them get to those answers. So I'd say it's not a bad thing, but what's so important when they are reaching out, I think, is the quality of the response. And of course, the sooner you can respond, the better. I will say, I think quality over that. And one thing that I think is really amazing that we do at Monday is our customer experience team. They even go as far as to record personalized videos to send back to people on tickets.
Oh, wow.
So like that extra step of getting a video that's with your name and your sort of use case. I know when we hear back, people are wowed that, maybe it took a few minutes more to hear back, but they're getting actually like what they need in a more customized, digestible format.
That's incredible. I think that makes a huge impact. I mean, scalability is always a question, but it's that extra customer experience. That's cool.
Exactly.
It also makes me think about different experiences I've had. And one of the benefits of working at a startup is now everybody's in home office, but I can quickly Slack a colleague, a customer success manager, when I'm in a trial call with a customer and quickly ask, hey, how do you feel about this? This question came up. They're having this issue. And additionally, what I've been doing recently is talking to different customers who have feature requests. And instead of them relaying it to me not bothering to ask follow-up questions and make a demand of product, we've started bringing product managers in and getting some feedback. Now, I know you and I had talked about also this type of friction in terms of product, right? The customer wants the world. We can only deliver, let's say, 5% of that because customers are very creative when it comes to other people doing the work. And that's great because then we get the data. But how do you handle different product friction situations where they have a question or a feature request and you want to address that?
Yeah. So I'd say off the bat, it's important to just ask as many questions as possible. That's my approach, at least, meaning before I'm even thinking, do I need to relay this to product? Do I need to loop in someone from the customer experience team? I need to make sure I have all the data to understand, first of all, is it just a friction because they might not know how to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, right? So is it a matter of us working through that and getting them the right sort of path forward? Or is it actually genuinely something that is a friction within the product, or of course maybe friction within some other experience that they're having with us? So asking questions to sort of get as much as you can to understand where it might fall, right? And then if it is something that requires relaying to product, so for example, if it's just something we currently don't do, but we know it's something maybe we've heard from other clients as kind of a feature request, we have a way, a really open line of communication to relay that to our product team and to kind of have other folks kind of, I guess, like weigh in, if you will, who are on the client facing side. So having an area where we're all logging that and where we're all sort of able to view, and the visibility is what I'd say is key, so that anyone can actually understand what we're doing. And then what is amazing is over time, right, we have our product team sometimes join calls with clients, right? And they're the ones who actually dig in and learn more. So similar, it sounds like, to what you do. I think that that's so important. And I think it goes the extra mile to show clients that we do care and that we're not just saying, oh, great, we took your feedback, we're logging it, right? So even if it's something that we're maybe not going to ever build, or that takes a while and is a process, I think the more people you can involve on the side of product to the client really helps them see that you care and that you're a partner.
Yeah, and I think the benefit there is twofold. So on the one hand,
Yeah.
you're showing the customer, and I think this concept of getting access, right? If we think
Yeah.
about the most common way of complaining in America, I'd like to speak to the manager.
Yeah.
You actually most of the time it's a question of, am I being heard? Am I being listened to? And
Yeah.
that kind of access to somebody in the product team, which normally is behind the scenes. Everyone knows they're going to have to deal with sales. Lucky them. Everyone knows they're going to have the honor of working with a customer success manager. But getting access to that product team is something really special that I think not enough products utilize. So I think that's a really key takeaway here.
Yeah.
And as far as kind of digging into that product friction, just
Yeah.
before we move on to another topic, are there any specific questions you can think of that are really helpful? The biggest one that's always thrown at me is, why do you want this? What are you trying to achieve? But are there any others that you would recommend our viewers hear?
Yeah, I like those. Those are definitely questions I ask as well. I'd also add, besides just what are you trying to achieve, sometimes folks don't always clearly know what they want to achieve. So I do think when you ask that, you learn so much. And I think then asking, well, how, like, what does this need to look like for you? Or like, okay, so if we could do this, would that help? And sort of working towards a middle ground, if that makes sense. So kind of trying to understand, depending again on what the scenario is, what you can maybe do in the meantime to help alleviate some of the friction they feel they might be experiencing while you work with your product team or other folks to see what we can do about a situation. So I think that that's really important. And also understanding, depending on your relationship with the client, but getting a sense of, how important is it to you? And I will say, I find most clients are super honest, and some say, you know what, I really would like this, but it's okay if it comes out in 5 months, right? And some will say, it's so urgent, it's a deal breaker. And, you might, I usually typically, people might think that clients will totally tell you everything is urgent, but I actually find that when it comes down to that and you're really working with them to try to understand that specific pain point, they will be honest with you. And again, it's a two-way relationship, right? So understanding where we can meet in the middle and how urgent something really is will help you as a CSM or an AE to really get a realistic answer and understand what we can do.
And what I also love about kind of that transparency and working with the customer on their timeline is, let's say we have a feature that we currently have slated for Q2. We can tell them, hey, we know that you really want XYZ. We're working on it and speccing it in product right now. But one thing that I really like to do in our CS team as well, we identify potential beta testers for that feature. So, hey, we don't have it now. Give us all of your intel, all of your input. We're going to make notes. And when it comes out, we want your feedback. So they feel valued, their opinion is heard, and we're getting this super useful data.
Exactly. We do the same thing. And I think that idea of letting people be beta testers is so impactful and empowering for both them and then for us to kind of show that we care and to have them give us the feedback, because it's just as valuable for us as well.
Yeah, and that brings me to another great point. Rebecca, you and I were discussing how once you've kind of got all of this input, I don't know what your situation looks like. Mine is a mess of like my MacBook notes, my Apple notes. I know there are better ways to do it. But how do you go about putting together all this customer data that you've gotten, all this feedback from this friction, and how do you make the most of it? You've got this gold mine. What now?
Yeah, well, so again, if it's coming through, if it's customers submitting tickets through our support channel, right? The customer experience team is able to categorize that and log that data, and it's able to be pulled and looked at. If it's coming from the CS side, so during the session with the customer, that is where we then, of course, it's probably no surprise, we use Monday at Monday. So we have an area within our platform that we log all of that feedback. And it is, again, open and transparent. And that's where other CSMs can actually come and add their customers. We can have a stream of conversations with our product team within that area as well. So we have it there. And then that's where also we're going to eventually track the progress, the status. Maybe it's something that is going to be developed or not. So we log it in Monday and we kind of track that there.
Yeah, okay. So basically to quickly summarize some of the things we talked about today. In a customer experience, there's always going to be some amount of friction, right? That's unavoidable. But you, especially as a CSM, would recommend that instead of shying away from the unpleasantness or what could be a difficult conversation, it's much better to kind of get in there and engage, right?
Yeah.
Now, in the case that we would like to kind of take preventative measures to kind of address that before it even happens, what can you do to try and empower your users from the get-go to remove as much friction as possible? How do you ensure a smooth handover?
Yep. So I'd say, I think before even the handover process, just in your product and in the user experience, the knowledge base you might have, right? How easy is it for me as a customer when I am working within your product to get help, right? So we have those resources available in our UI. And I think building up those resources is so key, especially for scale. So customers being able to easily search for something, whether it's an article or a video, and having all of those processes documented and, getting ahead of it, right? So when you're releasing, maybe it's a new feature or a new process or something like that, making sure that that is already there for folks to have. I think that solves so much. And I think people tend to want to be able to get information on their own. They don't necessarily want to always have to email someone, right? So the more you can make that information available and in an easy way, that's a huge one. And also something that I don't think I touched upon yet is, besides, of course, having a resource for them to reach out to, whether it's support or something else, in your own product, are you also giving opportunities for them to leave feedback? So what I mean is, if maybe they search for an article, do you have something after that says, how helpful was that, right? So we do things like that, allowing them to rank from 0 to 10. How likely are you to recommend this, or was this helpful? So giving them those opportunities at different points within the product, I think, is key for getting ahead and being proactive with potential friction.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of getting ahead of that and kind of stopping it before it starts, based on the customer health that you guys are tracking, based on the notes that you're taking and your interactions with them, when you notice that there's potential for customer friction, maybe customer A has either gotten in touch 25 times and customer B has not contacted you once since they signed up 6 months ago. Do you proactively approach that, and how should you do that?
Yep. So I'd say something that, for my experience as a CSM in my career, I think it's so important. If you are noticing someone is constantly reaching out, whether it's to you via email or to a support team, I would pick up the phone and call them. I would ask to actually have time to talk with them, because I think those are the kinds of people that are feeling friction from needing to email, or feel they need to email so many times. So I think that is key, and it will save so much friction going forward. And some people are hesitant to pick up the phone. I know you're in sales, so maybe you're not, but I think in general, people worry that that's going to cause more problems, or you're going to give the customer an opportunity to just sort of say whatever they want. But I find, even if there is something that they're not happy about, they're so much more relieved at the end that you took the time to call them. And that is key. And on the flip side, if you feel there is someone who is not engaging with you, I guess that's what you're mentioning, right? Like someone who, I think it depends, right? I'd say, are they actively using your product? If so, maybe it's not a horrible thing that they're not answering your emails, because you want to make sure you're providing them with value. So what are you reaching out about? What are you trying to talk to them about, right? So it's a balance. And I definitely do think, if someone's not answering you, you usually feel like that's not a great sign. But I think it's looking at it holistically, and then understanding maybe that's the kind of person you also do need to call out of the blue. Maybe an email isn't what they want, but it's kind of deciding, how are they doing from what you can see? Are they using it? Is usage high? Okay. And then, of course, deciding, are there other maybe folks we haven't talked to, we want to reach out to, but thinking through like the mode of communication on either side that would meet your customers' needs the best.
Yeah. Okay. And so, for example, somebody who's a little more phone shy, try email first. Other people, you can just pick up the phone. But another thing that you touched on that I really liked was the idea of providing value. And when I first started in sales, that's what my VP kind of hammered into us, always be offering value. Do you have any ideas for, like, almost, I'm thinking like pickup lines, like if you haven't heard from a customer in a while, how do you kind of reignite that spark and get the conversation rolling?
Yeah, so it's a great one, right? The pickup lines. Well, again, it will depend, but I think the value, for example, if it's someone who the data, whatever that looks like to you, looks great, right? They're using it, there's high usage, but you can't get in touch with someone. I would try to get in touch with someone else if you can. And also, though, I would think, all right, even though they seem happy from what we see, what are things we might have known? Like, what have I paid attention to over the past few months that they might be interested in, right? So is it new product features? Is it asking to feature them on a webinar, right? Like trying to engage them in a different way. And, it doesn't mean it always works, but I think that is super key. And also remembering, like, are you just reaching out because you haven't had a touch point in 6 months and that's a problem, but they're in really great health and you know that they like the product. So understanding like where you're coming from when you're reaching out. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes great sense, though. Also, like, not doing it just for the sake of doing it, right? Either doing it because there's a burning desire and there's a need to kind of get in touch because the health is in danger, or either because you have something to offer. For example, like feature requests, when we know, okay, this customer was really begging us for this 6 months ago, we finally have it. That way you can kind of pick up the phone with good news.
Yeah. And I think also offering to help them with something. So if, you feel maybe they're, not answering you because there's something wrong, not because, oh, they're in great health and they're just busy and don't need us. If you feel like there's any risk, I think kind of taking that time to offer a session to go over what they're doing or things like that, and really kind of understanding and getting to the heart of the issues, I find actually will start opening up people to talk to you. And I find even if you get an email back after multiple reach outs and you finally hear back and it's not the best news, that's an opportunity though to do something because they're finally engaging with you.
Yeah, that's also huge because you kind of have to acknowledge the fact that they really are interested.
Yeah,
They are your power
exactly.
users. Yeah, and another question, how do you figure out who exactly a power user is? How do we identify these people? Based on data or based on conversations?
I think it's both. I definitely think you want to see the data to see that someone is heavily using it. And I think what's important about that though is understanding why they're power users. So of course, maybe it's because your solution is totally changing the way they do their work in an amazing way, right? Or of course, maybe they have to use a solution because they're told to. But either way, I think the idea is wanting to make sure that any user can be that kind of power user. So how accessible is information to those people, and can they do what they need to accomplish within your product without reaching out to a customer success manager or without reaching out to someone on support? So I think having those resources is what will eventually help get everyone to be that level of power user, if you will. And of course, how intuitive is the experience for them as well.
Okay. Yeah, the intuitive part is really a huge component. Okay, so one question then from my side that I don't know if we really covered. If a customer does get in touch because there's the potential for churn, everybody's least favorite word, do you have any idea in the biggest sense of friction in a SaaS model, how exactly to try and save a potential churn customer? And if you can't save it, how can you at least make sure that your company benefits from this conversation?
Yep. So in your scenario, are you envisioning someone reaching out to their sales rep or CSM or any funnel and saying like actively saying, I do not want to renew my subscription with your solution? Yeah. So okay, so someone reaches out. I think it's such an opportunity to act really quickly. You have to be super proactive, or unfortunately you're being reactive, but you need to take that to heart and get on
Take
the
that
phone with
chance.
them exactly as quickly as possible, or loop in someone else. Again, it's going to depend on the situation, but I think in that moment, asking them or calling them out of blue, setting up a meeting, getting on the line to just hear why they want to churn, and then from there, understanding, you know what, are there things we could have done differently? What can we do going forward? What's the time frame, right, where we're at? I also think part of that though is how far away are we from that renewal, right? So if someone's reaching out a week before, you're narrowing the window of potential turnaround time. So I think in that same idea, it's super important when possible to be very proactive about your customers and their experience. And I think being able to understand and have a good pulse, right, whether it's from the data or the usage or whatever you're gathering, you'll have way more notice than this kind of sudden reach out. And I think, like you mentioned, if it's definitely a hard churn, which happens, that, you know, we can't always save customers, learning from it and making sure you're understanding and asking for their time to really help you understand what you can do to improve is I think critical, and like understanding why they left and making sure that you're tracking that. So whether it's, you know, I don't know, putting it in your CRM or relaying it to product somehow, really understanding why, because if you're not able to understand why over time people are leaving, you're clearly not fixing things. So I think that it's a great learning experience, and of course it's sometimes unavoidable.
Yeah, and make the most of it when the opportunity presents itself, right? If you're not learning, you're
Yep.
not growing. Okay, so Rebecca, thank you so much for all the valuable input you've given us today. I've at least learned a lot about what I can kind of prepare and smooth the landing for my customer success team when I do the handover. What would you say are like the biggest takeaways that people should leave this session with today? What should they really be stuck
So
with?
I think in terms of some key takeaways, it's really important to think about, are you collecting data from your customers, right? So are you doing something like an NPS, or are you doing something in your UI? So getting the data points, don't make assumptions, especially before you're even collecting the data. So figure out at scale how you can get different data points from your customers, and then analyze it and then see what you can do. So that's super key if you're not doing that already. And then I also think embracing some of the friction you might have already is also very important. So don't shy away from it. Don't try to, you know, brush it under the rug. Think through it and have an honest conversation with yourself and your teams about current points of friction and potentially what we can do to address them. And don't be afraid to also ask your customers, because I think from there, you're going to learn a lot proactively versus waiting for those other signals, like not renewing or things like that. And so I think too, that idea of what we just talked about, kind of hoping that eventually every user is a power user. And instead of hoping, I'd say focusing on that as well. So the resources available, the UI experience, and making sure that even if someone doesn't necessarily have a customer success manager at your organization, that they're still as successful because, again, of the experience that you're able to provide to them via resources and just in your UI.
Yeah,
And
give
how
them every
intuitive your
possible
product
chance.
is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
huge. Okay, then Rebecca, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to see what other questions we get, because I think you've got a lot of expertise on these topics. So
Thanks,
yeah, thank you to
Maggie.
everyone who watches.
It was a pleasure chatting with you.